3 years after its announcement, and Star Wars The Force Awakens has finally arrived. Now, don't worry, this review is going to be spoiler-free. I will do a spoiler-full review, probably after having seen the movie a second time, but for now these are my initial thoughts, completely spoiler-free. The plot of this film I'm going to stay away from, other than to say it does kind of cherry-pick plot turns from the original Star Wars trilogy, which I've seen a few people criticise online, but I really didn't have a problem with, because I think when you're bringing back a franchise after 30 years since the last movie in terms of chronology, you have so much ground to cover, so many new characters to introduce, that you can't have an overly complex story as well as having all these new things to cover as well, such as characters. So the fact that the story was somewhat simple and reminiscent of the original trilogy, I didn't mind that. If anything, I liked that. That gave the filmmakers the opportunity to focus on the new characters. Now, the film, as you know, is directed by J.J. Abrams and has been written by Lawrence Kasdan, who wrote some of the original trilogy. And it really manages to capture the spirit of the original Star Wars trilogy while still feeling modern. The humour in the film, and there's plenty of it, is very reminiscent of the humour in the original trilogy. It is a little bit on the goofy side, which I loved, but it never... When I say goofy, I don't mean it's like the fart jokes from the prequels or Jar Jar Binks or anything like that. It stays away from that type of humour, thank God. And it's very much Lawrence Kasdan's sense of humour from the original trilogy. J.J. Abrams, as you probably know if you've been following the development of this movie, really relies heavily on practical effects. He shot the movie on film as well, so it feels, on a sort of aesthetic level, it feels like it was made back in the 80s, you know, following Return of the Jedi. And that's one of the things I loved most about it, was that sort of old-fashioned sense of cinema that you get from this movie. The leaning towards practical effects is wonderful. The array of different creatures, of different costumes and sets, it's beautiful. It really just reminds you why you fell in love with these movies in the first place. You know, I will say that going into this movie I was not worried, but maybe cautiously optimistic. I mean, I've been on the hype train for a while now, but, you know, sitting down, even the moment I was sitting down in the seat in the cinema, I was thinking, you know, I need to sort of moderate my expectations somewhat, because look at what happened with the prequels. The moment that Star Wars logo came on the screen and John Williams' wonderful score started blasting out of the theatre speakers, I was 6 years old again. You know, it took me right back to when my parents took me to see A New Hope and Empire when they were re-released as special editions back in early '97. I loved it from beginning to end. I will say that now. I absolutely loved this movie. It was everything I wanted it to be and so much more. The new characters that are introduced are all fantastic. The characters are well drawn. The actors are brilliant. You know, you have Daisy Ridley playing the character of Rey, who is like a scavenger living on a desert planet. You have John Boyega, who you may know from Attack the Block, playing Finn, an ex-stormtrooper. You have Oscar Isaac playing a character called Poe Dameron, I believe is his name, who is like an X-Wing pilot. He's like the sort of the cocksure kind of plucky pilot type. They're all so remarkably likeable, and all their characters, despite the fact that not only does J.J. Abrams have to introduce them, as well as, you know, reintroduce old characters like Harrison Ford, Han Solo, they're all given arcs to a certain extent, some more than others, but they're all given arcs and just interesting stories, and the performances are all just fantastic. Standout is probably Daisy Ridley as Rey. She does a lot of the emotional heavy lifting in this movie, and she's just fantastic. She is a movie star about to happen. You know, this time next week she will probably be one of the biggest stars on the planet. She's absolutely fantastic. Harrison Ford returning as Han Solo, it's great. It's the most awake that Harrison Ford has seemed in years, coupled with Peter Mayhew coming back as Chewbacca. You know, their banter between the two is fantastic. It just takes you back to being a kid again. Carrie Fisher coming back as Princess Leia, although she's called something else now, but I won't ruin that for you. Again, she's great. Seeing her on screen with Han again is just it's movie magic. It's movie magic happening in front of your eyes. I just adored it. Another standout is Adam Driver playing Kylo Ren. Now, I've only ever seen Adam Driver in the HBO series Girls, and I'll be honest, I wasn't his biggest fan. Maybe it's because his character in that is a douche, but I just was a bit unsure about him. Kylo Ren, I will say this now, is one of the best villains put on film in years, is probably going to be held in the same regard as Loki from the Marvel movies. You know, people are going to fall in love with Kylo Ren. You know, going in, I was a little bit worried that he was going to be sort of Darth Vader 2.0, you know, the stoic, quiet, black-clad, mask-wearing villain who will just kill you as soon as look at you. But they do so much more with the character than that. You know, there are a few twists and turns in his backstory, and the performance that Adam Driver gives is so much more layered than that. And I also think, and this is something that my girlfriend, who doesn't like Star Wars but really enjoyed this movie, one thing that she said is that she feels like Kylo Ren is a very timely, a very modern villain, and I would agree with that, but we'll talk about that more in the spoiler-full review. Kylo Ren, great. It's going to go down in the history books as a great modern villain. I left feeling satisfied but wanting more, you know, and that's what a film that's being made, you know, with in mind that they're going to do 2 more in this trilogy. It's about as good a launching point for a trilogy as you could make. It's fantastic, and I think it speaks volumes that there were a few, I got the impression, tears shed in the audience during the movie. I know that I sort of got choked up at one point, and also the fact that the audience applauded at the end of the movie. Now, if you've ever been to see a film in England, that just doesn't happen. But the audience clapped at the end of this movie. There were whoops and cheers from the audience. Everybody seemed to love it. I loved it. And I know that people will make the argument that, oh, you know, people loved The Phantom Menace when that came out. No, they didn't. Nobody loved The Phantom Menace. You know, people may have tried to convince themselves that it was good, but it wasn't. It was terrible. Even as a kid, I knew that The Phantom Menace was shit. The prequels I refuse to watch now. To be honest, this film makes the prequels seem like a distant memory, a fever dream nightmare that you had once years ago. They don't matter anymore. Star Wars is back. This is the film that you are looking for. I cannot recommend it enough. Stay away from spoilers, go out, enjoy it, and relive your childhood.